When we look at Project 2025, and Susan, I'll give this one to you, it is a conservative blueprint for a second Donald Trump term. We've seen Donald Trump implement a number of the suggestions from Project 2025 through executive order, but there's also been a step farther that's been taken on those initiatives because Elon Musk seems to have authority that I think nobody even imagined possible, that any one person would be granted that much access inside the federal government. But just to go back on the aims of Project 2025 here, I've called it a conservative document, but can you flesh that out? Can you tell me what this intends to do to this country?
Yeah, I mean, look, Katie, it is a culmination of a decades-long radical project to essentially have the dismantling, or as Steve Bannon would put it, the deconstruction of the administrative state. The sort of Republican ideology, certainly elements of the far right, have been at war, in essence, with the very idea of an expansive federal government role in many areas of our collective life and certainly of our commercial life for decades. In some ways, this is a blueprint and a wish list for all of those things pulled together, both the conservative business dreams of deregulating many industries combined with a far right Christian nationalist idea. So it's almost a handbook it's the everything book for conservative ideologues. And, Donald Trump may not, choose to do everything in it. It's something like close to 1,000 pages. But, I have to say, to me, we're no longer in this gotcha game. Did Donald Trump lie about Project 2025? Yes, he did. Okay. Yes, he did. What's happening now with astonishing speed and rapidity is that he has unleashed the richest man in the world on an agenda. We don't know where it comes from. Some of it is convergent with Project 2025. Some of it seems to be what Elon Musk read on Twitter. For example, neither he nor Donald Trump ever mentioned USAID in the 2024 campaign. Right? Donald Trump didn't campaign and say that he was going to eliminate all foreign aid. Elon Musk wasn't talking about that at the campaign rallies he appeared at. He appears to have started tweeting about it in December when he was alerted to it by somebody else. So again, it's the lack of transparency. As Lisa pointed out, it's also the lack of Congress doing their job. Congress has a role here. If it was functioning the way that our founders envisioned, they also would be getting information and there would be accountability from what's going on in their oversight function of the executive branch. Not happening. There would be an effort for them to stand up and say, it is illegal for you to dismantle an agency that has been passed into law, that budget has been authorized and appropriated by Congress. But the Republican-controlled Congress is not playing the role right now that the founders envisioned.
On the issue of what Republicans used to believe in, and I know this is kind of a tired conversation, but I think it's worth pointing out this one aspect of it, which is federalism. I mean, Donald Trump is now taking executive orders. He's done dozens of them to try and remake the entire country in the image of his administration, including getting into individual states and trying to assert authority over the way these states function. It used to be that Republicans found that anathema. Do not get into a state's business. It's the argument they made for bringing abortion back to the states. It's a state's issue. But this is not happening, Susan, and Republicans are not speaking up about it. Steve Bannon, in an interview with the New York Times in one of the articles today, talked about how surprised he was that Republicans have just let Donald Trump run roughshod over federalism.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So many pillars of what we used to think of as kind of core Republican ideology have been reversed or simply ignored by Donald Trump. And certainly the argument that there should be a weak federal power and a strong decentralized state power, that has been at the core of what we associate with the modern Republican Party. Interestingly, Katie, now not only do you see many Democrats making that argument or leaning into that argument, but I've noticed that in the lawsuits that have greeted some of these executive overreach actions by Donald Trump at the beginning of his tenure, what you see is essentially two different Americas. And you have the Democratic attorneys general of states that have Democratic leaderships filing lawsuits as a collective, right? So you had, I think, 22 or 23 Democratic attorneys general on the lawsuit against the birthright citizenship executive order, for example. And then you have Republican attorney generals in red states being absolutely silent when Donald Trump attempts to override their laws and norms and regulations.
Lisa?
Everything that you and Susan are talking about right now has me nodding my head in vigorous assent, because the lawsuit that we saw the Department of Justice bring earlier this week against the city of Chicago and Cook County in Illinois, that is entirely about a school of thought that I'll call Federalist Maximus, right? Which is like the federal government takes precedent over anything else, that states do not have any control over their own laws, and therefore they're going to say the federal government wiped the field clean with respect to immigration. There is no room for a state, locality, or city government to make laws saying that they will not, for example, give assistance to immigration officials by handing over information or being involved in the transfer of custody from one state or city to ICE officials. This is, as you said, totally anathema to everything that they have been saying for years and years, but also anathema to what the Supreme Court said when it overturned Roe versus Wade, which is that it is time to let the people and their representatives decide, which many understood as code for it's time to send this issue back to the states.
Yeah.
If DOJ is going to take that position in an immigration case, that the Supremacy Clause wipes the field clean of states and localities' ability to regulate themselves, why can't they do it with respect to abortion? I would tell you, Katie, now I'll predict that they will say exactly that in some way, shape, or form when it comes to abortion rights in the next coming years.
You know, Susan, is it too much to question whether the Supreme Court might hand Donald Trump over more authority in the executive, and whether at the end of this 4 years, this country will be fundamentally different?
I believe that it's already changed in a very significant way in a very short period of time. You know, before the election, I know we're not in a recriminations phase, but, that was always the risk, is that Trump was proposing a maximalist transformation of the country, and in an election decided by a lot of people who weren't necessarily fully understanding of what that agenda meant. And, it's much easier to establish facts on the ground and then let the courts maybe roll it back or maybe not. But I would point out that when you shut down an agency like USAID, and as of midnight tonight, I believe more than 10,000 employees around the world on the sole order of Elon Musk and Donald Trump are being let go, it's not going to be easy. Let's just say that the courts and Congress somehow get this restarted. It's like turning the electricity back in Iraq in another disastrous American government takeover. You couldn't just turn the electricity back on, and it took years, and it in some ways never fully snapped back. And I think what we're seeing right now is an extraordinary effort to create new facts on the ground, that the legacy of which will be with us for a long time. Right now, Elon Musk's quote unquote buyout offer to federal government employees, it's been delayed until Monday by a federal judge. But you're talking about tens of thousands of federal employees who are already signaling that they're going to accept this offer and leave their employment. I've personally spoken with prosecutors at the Justice Department who've served more than 3 decades, served this country in public service, who are considering leaving very soon. You're not going to get that expertise back. These are nonpartisan civil servants that are being driven out of the government by the tens of thousands.
Yeah, the brain drain is what folks are worried about. And yeah, the federal government doesn't have a lot of fans in this country, maybe not understanding what exactly the federal government does or who is in the federal government. But once you break it, you got to fix it, and it might prove hard to fix. And Susan, you laid out so well, remembering what was happening in Baghdad all those years ago in your most recent piece. Susan Glasser, Lisa Rubin, thank you very much.